Before Columbus ever set sail, the Americas were already home to tens of millions of people living in diverse and complex societies. From the vast cities of the Mississippian mound builders to the cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans, and from the agricultural empires of Central America to the nomadic nations of the Great Plains, native peoples had created civilizations rich in culture, trade, governance, and spirituality. Today's lecture challenges the outdated myth of a new or empty world waiting to be discovered. Instead, we will explore the social structures, belief systems, and technologies that defined Native American life long before 1492. We'll examine regional differences from the Iroquois Confederacy in the Northeast to the Chinook traders of the Pacific Northwest, and look at how Indigenous peoples adapted to and shaped their environments. We will also consider how kinship, diplomacy, and oral tradition played vital roles in uniting or dividing these societies. Understanding these civilizations on their own terms is essential, not only for correcting historical misconceptions, but also for appreciating the depth and resilience of Native cultures that continue to thrive today. Let's set aside the old myths we've inherited, stories that describe the Americas as sparsely populated, underdeveloped, and frozen in time before Europeans arrived. The reality is far richer and more complicated. Pre-Columbian societies were deeply diverse. We're not talking about a single unified culture, but rather thousands of indigenous nations spread across two continents, each with its own language, governance, economy, and worldview. Think about it. The difference between the urban Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan and the nomadic Lakota of the Great Plains is as vast as the difference between ancient Rome and early medieval Ireland. Let's begin with urbanization and scale. In what is now Illinois, near modern-day St. Louis, the Mississippian people built Cahokia, a city that may have held 15,000 to 20,000 people at its height around 1100 CE. It featured massive earthen mounds, a grand plaza, and a wood hinge-style calendar aligned with the solstices. In the Andes, the Inca Empire controlled a territory that stretched 2,500 miles without wheeled transport or a riding system as we define it. They used quipu, a knotted string system to keep records, and they managed a bureaucracy capable of organizing armies, redistributing food, and building thousands of miles of roads. Meanwhile, in Mesoamerica, the Maya developed one of the world's most precise calendars, advanced astronomical observations, and a full written script. Their city-states like Tikal and Palenque were religious and political centers that rivaled any in the Old World. And let's not overlook agriculture and ecology. Indigenous Americans domesticated an astonishing number of crops, including maize, beans, squash, potatoes, tomatoes, and cacao. These foods didn't just feed local populations, they would eventually revolutionize global agriculture. Native farmers didn't simply adapt to the land, they shaped it. The Three Sisters method of companion planting, corn, beans, and squash grown together, were a master class in sustainable agriculture long before that term existed. Now, it wasn't all cities and empires. Many societies were semi-nomadic, particularly in the Great Plains, the Arctic, or boreal forests, where the environment demanded mobility and seasonal rhythms. But even these societies had deep systems of knowledge, oral histories, ecological expertise, and ritual practices that pass wisdom across generations. Perhaps most importantly, these societies were not isolated. From the Pacific Northwest to the Andes, goods, ideas, and beliefs traveled along trade routes that crisscrossed the continents. Obsidian from central Mexico, seashells from the Gulf Coast, and turquoise from the Southwest could all be found hundreds of miles from their sources. So when we ask, what was pre-Columbian society really like? The answer is dynamic, inventive, and deeply rooted in place and community. These were civilizations in every sense of the word, and to study them is not to look at a before snapshot in a European narrative, but to encounter entire worlds with their own histories, conflicts, and achievements. Let's begin our journey into pre-contact native tribes by focusing on the region of the Southwest. The Southwest region, expanding through present-day Arizona and New Mexico and into Colorado, Texas, Utah, and Mexico, was home to a variety of indigenous groups and cultural practices pre-colonization. In this region dwelled several groups we collectively call the Pueblo. The Spanish first gave them this name, which means town or village, because they lived in towns or villages of permanent stone and mud buildings with thatched roofs. The three main groups of Pueblo people were the Mogollon, the Hohokam, and the Anasazi. Anasazis, sometimes called the ancestral Pueblos, resided in the Four Corners region, where the states of Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona meet today. The Mogollon lived mostly in southwestern New Mexico, and the Hohokam dominated the desert of southern Arizona. Historians estimate that these three groups reigned over the region from approximately 200 to 1500 of the Common Era, and either dissolved or evolved into the Pueblos, whom the Spanish encountered during colonization and who still reside in modern New Mexico. They have also transformed into the Zuni and Hopi tribes. The Apache and Navajo tribes arrived in the Pueblo region around 1200 CE from the Pacific Northwest and remain distinct from the Pueblo people living in the region. Historians credit Anasazis, Mogollons, and Hohokams as the first farmers in America. Corn, the first crop the ancestral Pueblos cultivated, permeates many creation stories of the Pueblo people. The ancestral Pueblos regarded the harvest of corn not only as a nutritional necessity but as a spiritual gift. Although agriculture seemed to represent the society's advancement, the ancestral Pueblos had a much healthier diet when they hunted and gathered as opposed to the limited diversity in a diet dominated by corn. In the arid climate of the Southwest, ancestral Pueblos developed complex irrigation systems which maintained crops even in the hot sun. By 800 CE, Hohokams had created one of the largest irrigation systems to date, stretching through most of what we call Arizona today. This new irrigation system allowed the Pueblos to begin planting beans and squash in addition to corn. These elaborate systems enabled agriculture to flourish, which allowed new forms of production and societal development. Women began to make ceramic pots to hold the surplus of corn, squash, and beans, and large vessels to grind the corn. They also wove baskets with which to collect the harvest. Although agriculture boomed in the region, Navajos and Apaches arrived from the Pacific Northwest in about 1200 CE and retained the dominant food practice of their home region, hunting and gathering. Agriculture dictated the way the ancestral Pueblo people lived. With surplus food and stability, they became more sedentary, living in stone and adobe houses. Equivalent to massive present-day apartment complexes, these buildings had multiple stories, each with multiple rooms. The ancestral Pueblos, regarded as highly developed for their time, tended to live in larger towns with thousands of people and intricate dwellings. Chaco Canyon, a center for the Anasazi people, was a trade hub and home to over 12,000 people. The Chacoans, a branch of the Anasazi people living in the canyon, created over 400 miles of roads that connected the town to other villages in the region. The Chacoans mostly traded away turquoise, traveling west for seashells from California, south for exotic birds from Central America, and north for mineral and ores from the Rocky Mountains. Navajos and Apaches were more nomadic, and they continued to hunt and gather. Since they were always on the move, their homes were much less permanent than Pueblos. For instance, Navajos fashioned their iconic eastward-facing roundhouses, known as hogans, out of materials like mud and bark. These southwestern people believed that farming was a more reliable way to ensure their society's sustenance than hunting and gathering. But that hypothesis proved false in the face of natural disaster. A persistent drought lasting from about 1130 to 1180 CE decimated the Anasazi's crops, while a major flood in 1358 destroyed the Hohokam irrigation system. These disasters led the ancestral pueblos to hold spiritual ceremonies, praying to their gods for a bountiful harvest and good weather. They would pray to natural entities like plants and animals for agricultural, hunting, and personal success. These religious ceremonies brought together lots of people to create larger religious communities than social units like the family. The extended family lived and worked together, both women and men participating in the agricultural processes. Since the pueblos did less hunting, men helped with farming. In addition to farm labor, women raised children and performed household tasks, while male heads of households would participate in an informal council to make community or band decisions. Ultimately, most of the ancestral pueblos fled the area, probably due to drought. The Spanish encountered a hodgepodge of remaining descendants of the ancestral pueblos in the mid-1550s, whom they named the Pueblos. Now we're going to move on to the western part of the present-day United States, extending from the top corner of Washington through California and into parts of Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho. It was a home to a diverse array of Native American groups. They lived off the region's rich natural resources. It's hard to generalize about the cultural practices of Indigenous people in the West, since its climate and resources varied immensely, creating microenvironments which different groups used to their advantage. Over 100 federally recognized tribes lived in modern California. The Great Basin, the vast expanse of land between the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevadas, was home to the Mono, the Paiute, the Bannock, the Shoshone, the Ute, and the Gasiute people, among others. Most Western Indigenous people fished, hunted, and gathered for sustenance. Along the Colorado River, Native Americans gathered a variety of wild food and planted some tobacco. Acorns were a pivotal part of the Californian diet. Women would gather and process acorns. They removed toxins from the pulp inside the nut and made it into flour, creating a less perishable source of nourishment. In the Pacific Northwest, people foraged for pine nuts, wild plants, and more. American bison also roamed the Pacific Northwest, proving an easy target for hunters. Along the coast of modern-day California, natives hunted small mammals, snakes, and lizards. In the Great Basin, fishing sustained the native people. Salmon were plentiful along the Columbia and Colorado rivers. Native fishermen would use large harpoons to stab the fish swimming through the rushing water, along with complex trapping systems. However, a natural disaster like a mudslide or earthquake could completely disrupt the salmon patterns. The Great Basin natives were the first to create canoes to aid the fishing process and to secure a surplus of fish in preparation for times of scarcity. Evidence suggests that the Western American Indians had an extremely healthy, protein and nutrient-rich diet, much more so than other groups in the plains or Northeast who relied on farming. Salmon dominated trade networks as well as diets in the West. The area upstream of Long Narrows on the Columbia River became a central point for trade networks that extended to the plains and to the Pacific. The Chumash people of the region near modern-day Santa Barbara were known for their trade fairs, where they would exchange marine mammals for shells from the Pacific Northwest and animal hides from the plains. Acorns were often used as currency. Many Western Indigenous people lived in compact, easy-to-build and easy-to-move wickiups made of wood, leaves, and brush. Others, in resource-rich areas in the Pacific Northwest, lived in more permanent villages. The structure of shelter oftentimes indicated the reliability of the food source. The more plentiful the fish and acorns in the area, the more likely that Indigenous people lived in homes within societies that were there to stay.